we're going to get right into the matter at hand, which is military veterans and their battle against addiction. And um, Jermaine, when we talked about this, quite candidly, I wanted to have the whole meeting revolve around Jermaine and this award, the Hometown Hero Award. But he said, instead of doing that, and this is kind of typical Jermaine Atkins, he said, uh, let's minimize my award and focus more on something that I'm very passionate about, which is helping veterans. And Jermaine is a veteran of the Navy, right, Jermaine? I know you're on mute, but
Yes, I am. And
Navy veteran. How many years? There it is right there. Awesome. So, you know, Jermaine, like many veterans, came back from serving, was struggling on a lot of different fronts that you're going to hear about. And he has now dedicated a big portion of his life to helping veterans. So not only does Jermaine help people in general battle addiction, but in particular, he's very passionate about helping veterans because he knows what that is all about. And so we took that and said, all right, let's devote an entire meeting to helping veterans. So that's what this meeting is about. Jermaine was directly responsible for bringing to the table Dr. Eric Fretz and Saja Alexander Ramos. So both have very significant expertise in helping veterans work through the obstacles that are always there when they get back from duty. And I will tell you that they're each going to introduce themselves, but I've already talked about Jermaine. They're each going to have an opportunity to to introduce themselves as well, but to share their personal story, because both Dr. Fretz and Sasha are veterans as well, which is awesome. So when I went to look up Dr. Eric Fretz, I noticed on his LinkedIn page, and all of you who are participating this evening will see this. If you go to this guy's webpage, his title on LinkedIn, usually it says VP of this, sales rep for that, CEO of this. But Dr. Fretz's title says, help students, veterans, and student veterans reach their full potential. And I can think of no better way to introduce Dr. Fretz or tell you about this guy than to just say that's what he's about. He's here to help remove obstacles for veterans, as is Saja Alexander Ramos, who is the founder of Recovery Organization Resources. And I wanted everybody to know that we are going to edit in to this recording. So this meeting's being recorded. We are going to edit in these awesome resource lists that were made available to us by Dr. Fretz and by Saja. So if you have a need to avail these resource lists to a veteran in need, know that you can go back to the recording to see it. That will be one way of getting access to the resource list. And we are also going to publish those resource lists on the Washtenaw Fan website. So there's a lot of good resources that will be made available to anybody out there who is either on this Zoom meeting or who, if you know someone. So with that, I am going to start things off by turning it over to Jermaine Atkins. And Jermaine, share your story because it's incredible. It'll give people a perspective on what makes you tick. And then we'll go right down the line. We'll move on from when you're done to Dr. Fretz and finally to Sasha Alexander Ramos. So Jermaine Atkins.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Give me a thumbs up, Mario, if you can hear me all right.
I can not only hear you, but we're not getting that ghosting that we were getting with you from the last meeting. So
Perfect, perfect.
you got good connection.
All right, cool. So when you were introducing Dr. Fretz, and you said that that his job title is helping students, veterans, and student veterans fulfill their full potential. Like, I can't say this enough, but that is the most accurate statement I've ever heard in my life about Dr. Fretz. And in fact, I'm actually, I don't know if he would like to take credit for this because I haven't reached my full potential yet. However, coming from where I came from to where I am now, I have to give much of that credit to Dr. Fretz because he's been in my corner, he's helped me, he's mentored me, he's guided me. And even when my ideas weren't that great, he tried to guide me and picked me up when I failed and said, hey, let's try something different until I learned to pay attention. And here we are. So thank you very much for everything you do, Dr. Fretz, for the veteran community. And so with the title of this presentation being Military Veterans in a Fight Against Addiction, I guess what I would like to say is that that's really, like, it's one statement, but it can be approached from two different fronts. One reason why is because there are a lot of military vets who are actually struggling with substance use disorder personally. So they are fighting against addiction from that point of view. However, we have other veterans, or maybe the same veterans, who notice that there's addiction issues within their community and they're fighting against addiction from the allied perspective. So I just wanted to give a shout out to everyone who's doing that to add some positivity into our communities, because without that, I would still be where I was. And where I was when I went to the military was a place of just being lost, right? I grew up in Detroit. I went to a really good high school. I went to Renaissance High School in Detroit, and I never really felt like I fit in, right? So what I did to overcome some of those feelings was drink, smoke weed, right? And once I realized that that was not going to work for me, I decided to try something different, which a lot of people do use as an escape, although the 99.9% of people who make this move do it due to patriotism also. But I decided to go to the military, so I joined the Navy. And while in the military, you know, like, there's a culture of drinking that is, I won't say it's promoted, but it's definitely not frowned upon. And if you mix that with the stresses of the military, especially after 9/11, which is during the time that I was in, you know, like, for me, my substance use just went to a whole nother level. I'm an Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran. I'm an Operation Enduring Freedom veteran. And when I came home, the one thing that I did not have was freedom. I was in a place where I couldn't I couldn't even sleep unless I was intoxicated. Many times when I would be at home by myself, I would sleep in my bathroom with the shower running because the sound of the water reminded me of the safety of the bottom of the berthing area on my ship, you know? And although I did drink way too much, I got into harder drugs as well, you know, as a means to self-medicate. If you look at that one situation of my inability to sleep, or where I had to sleep in order to feel comfortable, those are signs that there were underlying issues that needed to be addressed. And it wasn't until, you know, things pretty much hit rock bottom for me that that I was informed that we could get help at the VA hospital. I never considered it. It was never pushed on me when I left the military, but by the grace of God, I was informed of this, and I found out that the VA hospital wasn't just for physical wounds, but for emotional wounds as well. So after going through the process of treatment facilities like sponsored through the VA, whether it was transitional housing that was paid for by the VA, or outpatient treatment here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, or inpatient treatment at Battle Creek, like all of these things helped me to achieve a peace of mind to where I can move forward and then begin to address my issues with substances. So after going through those experiences and seeing some of the things that other veterans were experiencing, which I got to see firsthand, I decided that not only was I going to emulate one of the guys that I looked up to, who was Dr. Fretz, by being of service to others, but I was going to do it in an area of life that I had experience in, and that was in the fight against addiction. So through volunteer work at different organizations here in Washtenaw County, and we have some really good organizations here in Washtenaw County, from Dawn Farm to Home of New Vision to Washtenaw Families Against Narcotics. I tried to give of myself to help others walk along that path that they may have fallen off of, have people like me, Dr. Fretz or Sasha, not been there to help them make it through, or to show them the way, because we've made it through, right? And throughout that process, I was able to go a step further and open up a company called Any Length Sober Living, which is a transitional housing company here for men in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where over the last few years we've housed hundreds of men. We've helped them improve their quality of life in a way that motivated them to stay sober. We've directed them to services at the VA hospital when they needed them. We directed them to services at other reputable companies like the ones I just mentioned if they were not veterans. And that all comes from the experience that I've had. And there is nothing that I'm more passionate about than helping others. And the reason why is because of the help that I was given when I was down and out, you know? And so my experience as a veteran, sure, it played a huge role in what it is that I've accomplished. It plays a huge role in the populations that I try to assist. And more than anything, I think that being a veteran in a civilian population after discharging from the military, if we are able to do what I believe that I've done, which is dig deep down inside of myself and apply those core values of honor, courage, and commitment toward this fight against addiction that we're experiencing in our communities as a team, I believe that we can finally start to make some headway. But the first thing we need to do is obviously bring attention to the issue like we're doing here tonight. So I would like to thank each and every one of you guys for being here and being a part of this. And I'm just one of the guys who helped put this together, but the stars of the show are definitely Dr. Fretz and Sasha here. So I'm really just going to pass it on to them so that we can hear the efforts that they're putting in here in the state of Michigan and across the country as a whole. So thank you guys very much. And if you guys have any more questions, I'll be right here available to answer.
So we're going to turn it over to Dr. Eric Fretz. And, one of the things we do to prepare for these meetings is to have like a dry run meeting. And we do that every time, not only to avoid Zoom technical snafus, which happen from time to time, but we also do it so that I can get to know our guest speakers and understand their history, what motivates them, and why they're passionate about helping, in this case, veterans. And what I learned about Dr. Fretz and Sasha, as I already said, think I already stated this, that they're both veterans. And so this means a lot to them. I got that impression when I heard their stories, which all of you are going to hear. And the other thing that I want all of you to know is that it was very clear to me that if you are a veteran or you know a veteran who needs help battling an addiction, that if you reach out to either Dr. Eric Fretz or Saja Alexander Ramos, you are going to get connected to resources who are not going to let you down. I got that impression, and I'm certain you're going to be left with that impression after they share their stories. So with that, Dr. Fretz, the, the stage is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mario. I appreciate that. And thank you, Jermaine, for your kind words. It has been an honor to be your friend and fellow entrepreneur for all these years. And thank you very much for what you said. It means a lot to me. And I look forward to many more years of adventures. So the brief background on me, I born and raised in Washington, D.C., came to University of Michigan in the 80s, did an ROTC scholarship to pay for my college. So my dad had started out very poor with a dad who passed away when he was very young, got very lucky to go to college, but got some help from his community to go to college, totally changed his life. He was determined to make sure that I got the best education I could, but obviously money was tight. So I came to Michigan, sort of traded 4 years of my life with the Navy for my tuition, but I didn't really think of it that way because at the time I was very passionate about going into the military. I was very ambivalent as a student, but I wanted to be in the military. I was drawn to it from a very early age. And so I was very happy and very dedicated and focused on that. I went through my 4 years here and then launched on a 20-year career in the Navy as a commissioned officer. I did about 10 years active and 10 years reserve. I really took my work very seriously. I really tried to hone my craft as a leader. And one of the aspects of that is that I learned that to be a really good leader, you have to have what's called covenant leadership or servant leadership. It's very popular in the books now. But basically, I made sure that all the young men and women who were assigned to me and assigned to my care knew that I would always make sure they ate first, always make sure that they drank first, never, would always put their needs first to make sure we could meet the mission. I mean, nothing's more important than the mission, but they're the most important thing to me. And so that became a passion point for me. And then I served through the 10 years active and reserve. I was deployed 3 times across 2 wars to the Persian Gulf. So the Persian Gulf kind of defined my career. I finished up there in 2008, being deployed actually to the Army. I was activated and then dumped into the Army's 18th Airborne Corps to serve in downtown Baghdad for an entire year. It's a rather bizarre end for a man who was trained his whole life to fight big battles at sea on large warships. But I got to hang out with my Army buddies. It was very educational. But as a result of that, I've had a wide range of experiences with young men and women from all the branches and all different backgrounds, and had a real good idea of kind of some of the things they struggled with. And then when I came back from Iraq, I also struggled for, if you ask my kids, it probably took about 3 years. I think I was kind of a hot mess for at least a year. But after about 3 years, I'd managed to kind of claw my way out. I was stubborn, thought I could do it myself. Looking back on it, I should have just gone and got professional help. Again, psychologist, heal thyself, right? And so I learned a lesson there, did some damage that I can't go back and undo. I'm going to have to just own that and, and move on. But it's taught me some important lessons. And the biggest thing it taught me was twofold. I realized that if I was struggling, and I came home to a fully functioning household, my wife's still there, my kid's still there, my monetary situation is fine, my degree's still there, my career's fine, house fine, everything's fine. I got all the resources, wife's a doctor, whatever, and I was struggling. And I thought to myself, gosh, some of these guys I served with, they come home and like their kids are gone, the house is gone, the car is gone, right? All they have left is the alcohol. They drink more alcohol. And then the Army's like, oh, there's something wrong with you, get out. And so now they've returned from war, they've lost everything. And then the Army kicks them out. And now they're on the streets and it's a society problem. And I was just, the more I looked, the more upset I got. And there's an early NPR radio interview with me in the early 2010s where I talk about this, and I'm very blunt and I am very disturbed and I am not a happy person. And what you see as a result of that is that I just became extremely dedicated to helping. I basically found that as upset as I was about it, when I did something about it, I felt better about myself. And so I became, in my wife's terms, obsessed with helping other vets and volunteering for everything I could. And so that became getting involved with the student veterans and the Veteran Treatment Court, and then the VCAT, which is a 6-county thing. So you see some of the stuff that I do. And it's all volunteer stuff where I lead other volunteers, which I think is the highest challenge as a leader. If you can get other people to willingly follow you and you're not paying them, your leadership is probably at least up to par. But I love doing that, and I love getting people powered up about doing good things for others. And it has become almost an addiction, I would say, in a way. And I think that's one of the things that's really cool about what Jermaine talked about, is that how much this stuff, when you're helping others, as a psychologist, I'll tell you, there's no more powerful way to give meaning and power to your own life than to be helping others, right? There's no bigger shortcut to feeling good and getting a little boost about your own meaning and purpose than to be actively engaged in helping other humans, because it's really what we're built to do, is to associate with our tribe and then to help people. So it's great having to do that. So I've continued to work. I've been to school a lot. I've racked up a bunch of degrees that are nice in the sense that they give me a way to give me leverage to do more good stuff, which I really enjoy. And I've had some success financially, which again gives me leverage to do some good stuff, again, which I really enjoy. And so I'm going to keep doing that. So that's most of my background. And then I think we talked just a little bit about sort of what was unique about the veteran population. Do we want me to throw that out now, or and how would you like to break that up, Mario?
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, so
Dr.
we had talked briefly about just what was so unique about the veteran population in terms of
Exactly.
how-
'Cause we talked about this on Thursday,
so there's
and
yeah.
I learned a lot from your, what exactly do veterans experience that
Mhm.
somebody in a normal job is not going to run into? So,
And the biggest thing that vets experience is twofold, right? So number one is that they're drawn from a cross section of society, but they are drawn overwhelmingly from a lower SES and rural environments. So if you look at, for example, downtown Boston or the wealthy suburbs of Massachusetts or any place like that, military service is not regarded as a normal option, and the numbers are very, very low. They don't even really have recruiting offices there. Whereas if you go to, Appalachia or my own town here, Detroit, right, lots of recruiting going on there. And it's a good tool. I mean, the military is very good at recruiting. They offer a lot of benefits. The GI Bill is an amazing tool. It pays for your college. It's incredible. But it's also the fact that you're getting folks that come in that are in some stressful situations as they're growing up. Then you put them in the military, and the military really kind of breaks you down a little bit to build you back up, and then they put you in some stressful environments. And whether you see combat or not, and whether you're trained for combat or not, sometimes you're trained for combat and see combat, sometimes you're trained for combat and don't see it, other times you're not trained for combat and don't see it. That's a bad combo. Or you don't see combat at all, but you see other stresses, right? Because you're subject to relentless pace. I have a young friend of mine, and she was 19 years old, had joined the Guard. She was just getting to know about being in the Guard, had just finished her initial training, and they mobilized her for COVID, and they're just working her like a dog. She's working some cases 7 days a week, right? They promise her a day off, and then mission priority, right? And she's like, Dr. Fratz, what is that? I'm like, this is the active duty military. This is how it works. The mission always comes first. And I said, you have to work as hard as you can. And what happened is that they worked her so long and so hard that she had a needle stick incident. She was so tired and overworked that she had a needle stick incident. And I was just like, oh my gosh, right? This is on her leadership. But again, this is the thing that the military does. You don't have an option. You're not allowed to say no to an order. If your boss is mean, you can't leave. You can't quit. If you quit in the military, you go to jail. So even if you never deploy and never even see combat, you are still subjected to levels of stress and loss of control and other things that as a psychologist we would call maladaptive, right? You're just put through a ringer in some ways. And then you come back out into civilian life. And interestingly, some of those pressures go away. But now you've lost your purpose, because while some of the stuff in the military really sucks, you can always count on everybody next to you and around you being on your team. There is no tighter grouping. The comfort of knowing, Jermaine talked about the comfort of being in that rack, in that birthing space, surrounded by people who he knows would die to protect him or to try and save him, right? And that is so powerful. And you don't get that at IBM or McDonald's. And then when that's gone, that's a challenge for veterans. And so you have all of the stress, Plus, then when you get out, you lose the support and the feeling of purpose, and that thing that's, as I say, Dr. Fretz, there's a hole in my chest where the army used to be, and it feels bad. And I'm like, I get you, right? And then the last piece, of course, is that the military, as Jermaine mentioned, as I sometimes jokingly say, the military is the world's best or worst forced internship in substance abuse that you'll ever meet, right? They ply you with caffeine. It was almost at a sick level that they would do this in the war zone. They would just give you unlimited energy drinks. I had people using 10 or more a day, and I had to counsel them on how to wean themselves down before they had a heart attack. Alcohol use is encouraged. I mean, I'll say not encouraged, but it is tolerated, and it's an issue, right? The way that the military, the way that the 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old 4-year typical enlistee experiences alcohol in the United States military is about as bad as you could get. If you wanted to get a bunch of people who had substance use disorder, that is exactly the kind of thing you'd expose them to. And then they all come out and come to the real world or come to the campus here at U of M, and I get to meet them and we get to work on that. So those are just some things to consider if you're not really familiar with military services, that veterans have been subjected to a wide range of varying stress levels and varying things that alter them. And then when they come out, they have something that they didn't even learn that they had become dependent and needed, which is this tribe feeling. Sebastian Junger talks about that in his book, and I think it's a nice way to talk about it. And then the last piece, of course, is that they've been exposed to some really unusual and healthy approaches to the use of substances, particularly alcohol. And all of that together puts them at a pretty high risk. So that was kind of the summary of what we talked about. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and sort of my thoughts on that. And I basically spend a lot of time working with a lot of people in a lot of different ways to try and help them unwind, unpack, and get themselves back in a productive stance so they can do the civilian thing. So that's kind of my world, and I appreciate the chance to talk about it.
Yep, awesome. Jermaine, you mentioned before we turn it over to Sasha, you came back, and you correct me if I'm wrong on this, but when you came back from having served, you had some debt, and you were able to, through resources, the VA helped you. I don't know if they, took out a check and made that go away, but you intimated that they helped even with that, recognizing that that might be a stressor. Am I correctly articulating that, or no? I don't want to misrepresent.
But no, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, because I don't want anyone who attends this forum tonight to think that the purpose of this forum is to like bash the military, bash veterans, or anything like that. The purpose is to make people aware of the experiences that veterans go through, but more than that, it's to make people aware of the resources that are available to veterans as well. And I like a lot of times military veterans, we are forced or we feel forced to fight for the benefits that we have available to us, especially in overcrowded areas like Detroit, for example. However, like my experience here in Washtenaw County was that when I was in need, things were like the Washtenaw County Veteran Services Office, I believe that's the name of it. They I went in and I let them know what my needs were. And one of them was stable housing. So they were like, hey, we can get you on the list for that. However, even if I got into a house, even if I got approved to move into a house, I could not move into a house because at that point I owed DTE money. I owed I owed everybody money. So how do you get utilities, right? And within those 4 hours, I believe Michael Smith is in charge of the office over there, but I was dealing with a representative named Laura Blakemore. And within 4 hours, we listed all of the obstacles that I was having in order to move forward with housing, and they all got fixed. I mean, we called DTE, we got it paid off. I had a driver's license, but I was driving without insurance. So we called USAA and we got a 6-month policy. If I wanted to get, when I was ready to move into my apartment without money, she gave me a food voucher to Whole Foods, and we got food. She gave me a gas card with $200 on it so I can put gas in my truck. Like every one of my needs were met. And I know that experience isn't that experience is not unique to Washtenaw County, but I don't think that's a typical veterans experience. But that's why we're here tonight, is to speak about these resources that are available locally, statewide, as well as nationwide.
Yeah, and
So
to,
bring
to,
that up.
just to piggyback on that, to let everybody know, um, it, you know, I was once contacted by folks to help a veteran. This was not long ago, and um, one of the things that was of concern to this young man was that if he reached out for help at the VA, that he would be told to man up. And I will tell you that that will never happen with Dr. Eric Fretz or Sasha Alexandra Ramos. So with that, Sasha, tell us a little bit about yourself, certainly your story, the fine organization that you started, how it helped veterans, and why you're so passionate about doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Mario, and thank you, Jermaine, for inviting me, and congratulations on your award. And thank you so much, Dr. Fretz. Dr. Fretz said everything really well, and being a woman who has lived experience as a woman in recovery, as a veteran who's gone through these kind of systems, like Dr. Fretz, it is really complicated, and trying to navigate these systems without support or help is really challenging. I wanted to just quickly address the question from David in the chat. Because I was a veteran who was prescribed opioids after a non-combat injury in 2009. And because of that, because of my chronic pain issues, where I was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, a major depressive disorder, and several things that I could list, I was given a lot of prescription medication. And throughout that time, that process, I don't believe it was taken thoughtfully. And there's a quick switch from using a substance for chronic pain to using it as a crutch, an emotional crutch. And for me, as a woman in recovery today, I know that there was a root cause of my addiction. And addiction is only but a symptom, right? And I needed to address those things. And when I was ready to address that at 25 years old, when I was already abusing opioids, prescribed by the VA, but also buying from friends and getting from people, I went to the VA and I was turned away because they didn't have anywhere to send me. And I'd like to say that today there are many, many resources, but at that time, that's what happened to me. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about getting veterans, military folks, military families, their loved ones, the help they need. I've worked for an admiral who also lost his son to an opioid overdose. And just to show you that, an admiral to try to go to the system also had challenges. And then if you watched Meghan Markle and Harry last night, she is royalty and still had trouble asking for help within this family system. So I want to remind you all that stigma is alive, and it's happening to people, that it causes others to not ask for help. And that's one of the challenges, not only being growing up in the Asian American culture, but just in the military too. There's this persona that we have to put on, even in society, that like we have to show up like this and we have to show up like this, and we're not taught to be brave and show our emotions and not worry what other people think if we show a different emotion other than strong. So, I definitely today I work with organizations that support veterans in recovery. I want to echo what Mario said, that if you are a veteran or if any veterans need any support, I am very, very accessible. I'm here to take people through this process, whether it's getting your disability claim, which is also really challenging. VA math and disability, if you look through it, it doesn't make sense. And the way that they you know, say they give you 50% for PTSD, but you're not actually getting a whole 50%. You're actually getting a 40%. And these are why these systems are really challenging, because they're hard to understand. And if you don't spend the time to really look at it, or have a veteran service officer, or go to the DAV, Disabled American Vets, or it sounds like there's some great resources in Washington now, which is amazing. I highly recommend all of you to check them out. And one last piece that I really want to talk about too is that these men today, they talked about being of service after service. And I really, really love that. And Dr. Fretz, I loved what you said, that it is a part of our existence, right? To want to be a part of a tribe, to want to connect. And I believe that the opposite of addiction is connection. And in order for us to feel a part of in this world, we have to have a purpose. And for my whole entire life as a young person, I was always looking for a purpose. It's also part of my culture. We're just always giving back, and it's no wonder why people get addicted to this. It's because there's no better feeling than to know that you helped someone else today. And Jermaine, you brought up the three core values of the Navy, you know, honor, courage, commitment. And those are really, really important, right? And those are also like recovery values that were reinforced in my life. And did I get that right? Honor, courage, commitment. Is there integrity in there, or is there another one? Okay, good. You know, it's been a while, right? And you know, those are recovery values. And sadly, today in this world, not every human lives by values. And it takes sometimes living in recovery, which to me is a mindset that you just adopt. Recovery is actually for everybody. It's not just if you have a substance use disorder. It's also for mental health. It's also if you lost a body part, if you went through some rehabilitation. We need to start normalizing this language and making it okay for people to have periods of their life where they're not doing all right. And it is okay. And I hope all of you find the communities where you can feel supported. Definitely reach out to me, Jermaine, Eric, because they're available and I'm available, and I'm just so honored to be here. And thank you again, Jermaine, and Washington Family Against Narcotics. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sasha, I think that the way that saying really goes is honor, courage, commitment, 1. Honor, courage, commitment, 2. Like when you're doing your push-ups. That's the only way I've ever heard it.
It's been a long time. It's been a really long time, but thank you for reminding me. I'm getting flashbacks of being yelled at. But being yelled at for me was the easy part. I grew up being yelled at, so thanks, Jermaine.
You know,
And Mario, I think that like just bringing up like the way that we were instilled, like the way honor, courage, and commitment, the saying itself, the way it was instilled in us was through vigorous exercise, right? Like everything in the military that they want you to learn is attached to some sort of physical stress, right? So being that that's the case, that kind of just goes further to what Dr. Fretz was saying about like the abnormal situations that military veterans have experienced. Like for us, it probably didn't seem like a big deal when we were in it, seemed fairly normal. However, I bet if your employee showed up and you said, okay, today we working out, it would be a little bit different. So thank you.
thank you, Sasha and Jermaine. Got a couple of questions here. And the first one that came to us was, this is an interesting question. Does the VA support MAT, or, you know, medically assisted therapy, or MAT treatment, or what is the culture with the military around utilizing MAT therapy in recovery?
I'll jump in for the VAs that I know about. I know that there isn't a person with lived experience with recovery, they don't understand that Matt needs, in my opinion, Matt needs to be paired with some type of therapy or community support, some mutual aid. I've seen doctors just prescribe it, VA doctors and regular doctors just prescribe it without any type of support after that.
Dr. Fretz, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, and this isn't something that that sort of clinical angle is not my specialty. Although I do a lot of work with individuals. It's not. I'm not clinically licensed, so I don't do that sort of work directly. But I do know that the individuals that we have who go to the VA do use. They are often given prescriptions to assist them. So there are a whole variety of classes of drugs. Again, I don't prescribe that. Are useful for both alcohol and opioid recovery and whatnot. And those are sometimes featured in the treatment plans that we see in the treatment court. So while I've not heard the term MAT used within the VA system with the VA people I work with, I think that there's something we're doing that's at least overlapping partly into that Venn diagram. So I think it exists. Whether or not they fully embrace it and make it like a primary modality, I don't know. In most cases, for the treatment court and for the VA, what they're mostly saying is, let's get you into treatment and let's really, they're not really hammering the whole abstinence thing, but the idea is, let's get you off of the dependency, however that can be done, and then give you the tools to not go back into that. So,
just to add, by the way, we have another question, but before I ask that question, we actually, a year and a half ago, had a fascinating panel discussion on MAT versus abstinence. And I had a problem with the title because it's not really versus.
It's not either or. Yeah.
It's which one is better for, if I'm a physician, which one is best for my patient? What do you think, patient? And what was ultimately determined as a result of that panel discussion. And we're probably going to do another one on MAT and on abstinence because we've had several people ask for it. It was over, like I said, had to be a year and a half ago, maybe going on 2 years now. And it's time to do another one. But what was ultimately determined was expressed by a psychiatrist on the panel who said, there are advantages and disadvantages to both abstinence and MAT. And it's my job to communicate those pros and cons of each to my patient. And then for the patient, in collaboration with me, decide on a course of action. And then if it's abstinence, I communicate to my patient, I'm there for the duration, for the journey. And if it's MAT, I'm there for the journey. So, I would be willing to bet that the VA, regardless of whichever way a veteran decides to go, that they're supporting them just based on the representation that we have here on our panel. So next question is marital or family counseling encouraged and or available to returning veterans?
Well, I can address that to a certain degree. Not in the summer of 20, well, I know that previously it was not available. At least it wasn't available to me. But in the summer of 2020, I had returned to the VA for some additional counseling, which for me is a great idea. I go back and I get touch-ups whenever I feel a little off track. It's always good to bounce something off of a neutral party that has your best interest in mind. But when I was there, I brought up the idea of couples counseling. And I was very shocked to hear that not only is couples counseling available, but they don't call it marriage counseling because you don't have to be married to even qualify. Now, they did have some sort of criteria. I believe it may have been living within the same residence or planning to live in the same residence soon. So, but that's something that I would take up with them, with the VA, to find out what the exact criteria are. But it was definitely available in the summer of 2020.
Awesome.
And I put also in the chat there that there are some really nice programs that we just happen to be lucky to have here in Washtenaw through a group called MSPAN, some military support programs and networks, and these are grant funded. And they do a thing called PAVE for students. They had a thing called Buddy to Buddy, which recently wasn't selected to be refunded, so it was actually handed off to the state of Michigan. So the MVAA now runs Buddy to Buddy. That's actually mentioned on that resource sheet I gave you. And then they also have this Homefront Strong, which is a really nice one. And they also have a dedicated after her service program for female veterans. That's really good to help female veterans form a tribe. So MSPAN is a nice place to check out. They've got some good programs there. And again, Homefront Strong would be very much this sort of family couples thing. They offer some resources while you're deployed and then afterwards. It's good stuff. So
Great. Thank you for that, Dr. Fretz. Okay, do we have any more questions from anyone? You know, I think one of the most important goals, things we wanted to accomplish as a result of putting this together is that if you know a veteran, or if you are a veteran participating on this call, or if you on this Zoom meeting, or if you end up listening to this recording down the road, don't hesitate to reach out. You know, help is here through people like Jermaine Atkins, Saja Alexandra Ramos, and Dr. Eric Fretz. So we have Mr. John Garrett.
Hi guys. PTSD is synonymous with me when I hear military, and you know, it's probably from the movies that I've watched, but I'm curious to know, like, where's the line drawn, or what's the determining factor for PTSD? Is it what you've seen? Is it what you've seen? Is it what you've gone through? I'm just curious to know that, like, where is the line drawn to decipher PTSD? The first thing that comes to my mind with military people that come home is like, oh, he's got PTSD, and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but it's just in my mind, it's just synonymous with the military, and I'm just curious to know where the line is drawn, and why I'm feeling that way. Why is it societal? Is it societal? Is it a societal issue, or is it something actually that happens to every military personnel that comes home?
I'd like to jump on this one first. Thank you, John, for your question. And I am a huge advocate of trauma-informed care. And that goes for the substance use side and also for the veteran space. And to me, trauma is any experience, any painful experience. So trauma is also relative and it's complex. And trauma is also held in the body, right? So we give all these medications for the mind, but we're not treating the body, and that thought and this idea is not integrated into medicine yet. And I would also like to validate, yes, trauma looks very different for everyone. Some people even say that coming out of your mother's womb is traumatic if you can remember it. So you know, when Jermaine and Dr. Fretz were talking about the different experiences of that service members feel, like, for me, boot camp wasn't traumatic, but there are other people that believe that boot camp was traumatic. So it's all really relative, and also I don't think we are further enough in medicine. I think there are some places that are treating trauma differently, but we're also kind of behind in the trauma world. I highly encourage checking out Dr. Gabor Mate's work. He is a doctor who's really talking about addiction and trauma, and they are synonymous. Sadly, they are synonymous, even with addiction. There's so much, people say addiction is traumatic too. So I hope I answered a little bit of your question, but I am really passionate about this because I don't think there's enough information on it.
And I think another piece of your puzzle is that it is definitely hyped in the media. So you're seeing some of it as it's a popular topic. And actually, to some degree, veterans actually resent it a little bit, right? Because there's a great article. It's a fake news article from The Onion, and it says, you know, veteran goes crazy after reading a 100th article about how all veterans, you know, and
Yeah.
so it is just hype. Although the numbers are clear that much like ADHD diagnoses or other diagnoses, now that we're paying attention to it, the diagnoses are more common because, again, it's something that you only would look for or see in the most extreme cases after, say, World War II or Korea or even Vietnam.
Yeah, right.
Sensitized to it, and the veterans are more aware of it as well. So they're making more claims on their own, and they're getting diagnosed more even when they don't make the claims. But the issue of stress from military service is not new, right? It was called battle fatigue. It was called shell shock in World War I. And so individuals who experienced combat in the most extreme versions that were so broken that you just saw them on the street and were like, that person's not okay, right? But there were tons of people who lived ordinary lives of quiet desperation, sometimes returning to their families, never talking about it, committing suicide unexpectedly at 65, and no one understood why, and they could never talk about their experiences, right? And so, this idea that we don't give veterans this space to talk about and process this stuff is a little bit toxic and dangerous. And so that's why I really love the example set about how we make this a priority and really be push for this trauma informed stuff, because I think if you ignore that, you're going to have a problem making progress in anything else. So and then the other part to remember is that we have just put an all volunteer military, which represents less than 1% of the population, through the longest war that's technically still going in our nation's history, like 20 years. And there are people in the military system who have deployed not once, not twice, but as many as 14 times over those 20 years, being in combat for periods of up to 15 months at a time, and being in constant combat where they are in danger of death almost every day, which the combat veterans, even in Vietnam, they would be on the front lines for 30, 69 days, then they would be pulled back and allowed to recoup fully. And during my experience in Iraq, I was under fire constantly, as was everyone else. Every day, you were never safe. You were constantly in that stress of fear of your life for 365 days. And then people would, and that was, again, way worse than it had ever been in any other situation. And then these people come home and they get at most a year off and they sit right back. In some cases, they transfer to a new unit that's going back to combat 3 months later. And so the level of damage that we are inflicting on human souls with this deployment pace, right, and this new way of doing warfare, and this tiny concentrated mass of volunteers that just stay in the military as a career and just bear all of the burden of the country's wars, that is not a good idea. And I'm here to say it. So.
Can we get a round of applause for Dr. Fred? That was really amazing. Thank you. That was so good the way that you explained that. And I agree 100% with what you said. And I also just want to say that the body does have the possibility to heal if you want it to heal. And there's enough resources on this call between all of us and out there in the world that people can get the help. Veterans, military folk can get the help that they need when they need it.
And by the way, I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, Washtenaw Fan is going to be rolling out trauma yoga and acupressure, and it is because of the link that is very strong between trauma and addiction. I mean, I don't know exactly what the percentages of people who are experiencing or suffering from a substance use disorder, but it's a very high percentage of people that they go hand in glove. So thank you for that, Sasha. Thank you for that, Dr. Fretz. I have a question here. This is a follow-up from the chat comment in the chat feature. As a psychiatrist, front-end acute to chronic pain management is the nexus point at which prevention can be achieved if addressed at the very beginning or in early chronic pain. Is this a message and concept seen and used in the VA system now? Either, Sasha or Dr. Fretz.
I don't think I see that one.
Yeah, this came to me privately.
Oh, okay.
I see it. I would like to say that I'm not I don't work for the VA. I sometimes get services through the VA, but I get a lot of my care on the outside. And as someone who's really deep in wellness and just understanding the body from my own personal experience, I don't see preventative measures for pain, and that's just what I've seen as medicine as a whole. And to me, those preventative measures are like mindfulness and eating correctly, a good diet, exercising, and those kind of really back to basic stuff are protective measures to chronic pain. As someone who has chronic migraines, a traumatic brain injury, I also lost vision in my right eye, which is my kind of experience with chronic pain and my own kind of personal journey with it. I personally don't see it, but it would be great to see.
Right.
There
Thank you
seems,
for that,
oh, I see.
Susan.
This was the question way back at the very beginning. Yeah. So yeah, I would say the VA is at least aware, but like I mentioned in my comment back, I said that the VA has been under fire for a number of years for being a little too quick with the try these pills. And I do have some folks that I've worked with and some individuals that I know who have had some serious life consequences because they were put on a aggressive polydrug therapy instead of counseling and these other host of sort of, we don't know, there's a whole host of things that are prophylactic towards some of this, mental health issues, right? So, yoga and getting involved in a tribe and getting outside and exercising and having people around you, and even something as simple as we were doing the little breathing exercise through our noses earlier, that was like, yeah, there's all so many little things, and they're tiny little things, but taken all together, they can really put you in a much better space. So I would say, yeah, the VA is aware of it, and the medical community itself is going through this pendulum swing. So like about 20 years ago, they started in with this: you're not treating pain well enough, and the pain scales with the smiley faces went up everywhere. And then about 15 years ago, doctors started to get disciplined and punished for not managing pain well enough, and that was when the explosion of the oxycodone and all that stuff. And then, about 10 years ago, some people were like, whoop, whoop, whoop. And about 5 years ago, it was like, this is out of hand. And so it's a cycle. And now the push back against the overprescribing has begun. And this is like, well, what are the alternatives? And look at all this sideline damage and all this diversion that happens when you start getting everybody on these pills, and they're all pulling down, 40, 80, 100 a month, and then coming back for more. And that all those aren't being consumed, right? So anyway, it's a big mess. But the VA, I would say, is aware of it. And I don't really speak for the VA, I'll mind you, but I work with a lot of professionals at the VA, and they seem to be very dedicated, particularly here at U of M. And the VA here, they're very dedicated to taking care of their patients. And, I have not seen any of my cases, this overprescribing, but you raise a good point that like it's sometimes it's very easy if you're backlogged and you can't see a therapist right now, but try these pills, right? So.
Thank you for that. If there are no other questions, I'm going to proceed toward the end of our program, which is very important to me and to a lot of people, which is to honor the 2020 Hometown Hero Award for the state of Michigan, Jermaine Atkins. And we have a guest speaker with us. Amy Moore, can you kind of chime in here, or at least show yourself? There she is.
Yeah.
Who's Amy Moore? So I want to share the Jermaine Atkins story of how this came to be, because this was at a meeting in January of last year. We had someone here who led the nation in being a benchmark for QRT, Connie Priddy, Priddy, from Huntington, West Virginia. And she drove here from Huntington, West Virginia to be our guest speaker. QRT is quick response teams, and now those teams are proliferating throughout the state of Michigan. It's all a good thing. But because we had someone coming to us with that kind of reputation, we had a lot of people from the state of Michigan present for that meeting. We had judges, people from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, politicians, and it was an interesting meeting. One of those people that was there was Amy Moore, who is with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And I've known Amy now for, I think, a couple of years. She reached out to me after that meeting and said, you know, great meeting. Who is the guy that grabbed the microphone and started talking about how he helps other people? And, you know, and you know, when we have our face-to-face meetings, we have about 20 or 30 people who grab a microphone. So I had to kind of narrow it down. You know, was it a small guy, big guy? What? No, this was a big guy. And I said, okay, that had to be Jermaine Atkins. What's up? And Amy said, and I'll turn it over to you, Amy, because why don't you kind of share what you shared with me?
Well, it was the work that needed, yeah, it was the work that needs to be done. And I just was so impressed with Jermaine. And actually I spoke to Jermaine, and he had some of his folks from his sober living community with him. That was an outing that they were on. And I think one of the things, I guess I'd like to back up a little bit and just tell you that I've worked in public health for 30 years. I worked in local public health. I worked at the Ingham County Health Department. I've worked in an FQHC. And now I'm at the state. I've been there for 3 years, managing contracts. And I'm trying to, you know, for my profession, I'm trying to synthesize all the things that I think were needed at the local level and trying to do my part to get those things happening. And when I talked to Jermaine, I was so impressed because housing and sober housing and housing in a place that's clean and safe and accessible is such a barrier. And unfortunately, what I'm hearing, even as we're talking, to get through these systems that were not developed as systems, they're just disjunct things that provide service, and we have to figure it out. We really need someone to hold our hand and walk us through it, because it's impossible. It really is impossible to access services without some help with people that know what those services are. But I also wanted to share something personal with me, is that my college was paid for by the GI Bill, because my father was a Green Beret. He was drafted into the Vietnam War, and he came back a broken man. He died when I was in high school, but we didn't have anything to do with him after he came back. And my life is really dedicated to doing what you're doing, and that is making systems that work, creating programs that make sense. And right now, the biggest hole in all of this recovery trajectory is what Jermaine did, and the housing and the connection that he's providing, a safe, stable place where you can get healthy. So that's why I nominated him for the Hometown Award. Unfortunately, the award ceremony at the Capitol Rotunda in Lansing, where I live, was in April of 2020. And so it was canceled, and they simply mailed Jermaine his award. And so I'm so grateful to be here and to honor Jermaine. So thank you for all that you do. This means a lot to me and a lot to people that are here. And I really want to honor you and thank you for the passion that you bring. Thank you.
Amy, thank you so much. Jermaine, did you know that Amy's father was a vet? I didn't know that.
I did not know that either.
That's awesome. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that. And, you know, so just to put the capper on this, Amy, so she says, well, you know, I said, that's Jermaine Atkins. And why are you asking? And she said, because, and she explained, there's this thing called the Hometown Hero Award for the, you know, and I was thinking, you know, it might be a local thing and not that big of a deal, but she said, it's the state of Michigan. And I said, well, whoa, okay, that, you know, what are we doing here? And I reached out to Jermaine because I wanted to make sure that he was okay with being nominated, and he was. And so he submitted an application that Amy Moore was very helpful to Jermaine and to us in terms of making that application just right. And then in, I don't know when it was, March, or it was before everything shut down, might have been February, Jermaine got a formal notification that he had won. And I felt horrible when everything shut down. I want you to know, Jermaine, I had that day blocked off on my calendar to drive out to Lansing to be there with you. And I wanted you to know that when we're face to face, we'll really do it up. We'll get a cake. Congratulations, Michigan. We'll have a big glove on there, State of Michigan, Hometown Hero Award. So Amy Moore, you're awesome. Thank you for taking the time out of your day your evening to honor Jermaine Atkins in this way. Jermaine, you're awesome. I care about you deeply. I love you. Thank you so much for all you do in our community, okay? And I wanted, before we zoom off, thank you to everybody on the panel. Dr. Eric Fretz, I know you don't brag about all your degrees, but you got a lot of them. Jermaine, how many does he have anyway?
At least 6 or 7. That's the minimum. He probably has a couple. He probably graduated from more than one high school too. He's got everything.
You know, and Saja's incredible. And the net is veterans need to know you got people like this fighting for you on your behalf on the other side. That's the main thing. That's the message we want here. Again, remember the resource lists are going to be a part of this recorded meeting. They're also going to be published on our website. Please remember to fill out the survey on how we're doing in our meetings. Any future ideas you have, topics you'd like us to cover, that's what we're here for. And to make things better for people battling this insidious disease. And with that, one more thing, just to tee up our next meeting, we've got the first pilot in the history of commercial aviation.
All right.
Who've been arrested stepping off a Boeing 737 loaded. That man would be Captain Lyle Prowse, Prouse. Go Google him. His story is one of the few that appears in the big book. And you know, if it's published in the big book, his story is filled with redemption, strength, hope, everything you want for someone close to you to hear who's battling a substance use disorder. You're going to hear it from Captain Lyle Prowse. This guy's got a Southern charm to him. He lives in Georgia. He's got that drawl. He is just a good dude. And he was pardoned by President Clinton in 1993. And guess what? The guy that was his biggest proponent that wrote the letter to get him pardoned was the judge who threw him in jail for 16 months. So you can do this. If Lyle Prowse can do it, you can do it. If Jermaine Atkins can do it, and Saja Alexandra Ramos can do it, you can do it too. So we're going to have word of that next meeting published on our website ASAP. Encourage those you care about deeply who are battling an addiction to register. Brandon, did you want to add anything? Am I missing anything? Okay. One last thing. The University of Michigan Addiction Treatment Clinic also has resources available to veterans. Angela, did you put that in the chat feature as well before we zoom off?
Yeah.
So, listen, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of this incredible meeting. It's an honor. You know, somebody just asked about this, thanking me and others on this panel for doing what we're doing. And I'm certain I speak for everyone here, including our Zoom coordinator, okay? But it is an honor to help people battling this disease. It really is. So thank you for being there. Everyone take care. We'll see you guys in April at our next meeting.